G'day folks, ZD here, and welcome to the second of my Bethesda commission starter guides for Starfield's launch. This game is jam-packed full of loot, weapons and armor, resources, consumables, and plenty of valuables to hawk for credits. Loot-driven gaming is what I'm all about, so let me sort it all out for you. This is your guide to loot in Starfield. Now, so that you understand the rest of the guide well, let me first give you a quick overview of the categories of items and what you can find in them. Weapons include shooters in all of their forms, kinetics that deal physical damage, lasers that deal energy damage, particle weapons that deal a mixture of both, and electromagnetic guns that can non-lethally knock out enemies. It also includes melee weapons like axes, knives, and swords. Spacesuits are your primary armor slot, and they also protect you from physical and energy damage, as well as giving limited protection against environmental hazards. Helmets are also an armor slot and do much the same thing as suits. Packs are backpacks, and they provide a bit of protection as well, but they're primarily where you can get boost packs, aka the jetpacks. Not all packs have boost packs in them. Some provide boosts to oxygen or provide extra carry weight instead, though to be honest, it's pretty hard to argue for playing without a boost pack. Outfits in the apparel slot provide a small amount of combat and environmental protection, as well as another small bonus like extra carry weight, O2 recovery for running, or extra health. It's mostly a cosmetic slot otherwise, and these bonuses are generally fairly small. Throwables are grenades and mines. They come in a variety of different forms and damage types, from timer to impact detonation, shrapnel, fire, or cryo damage, and so on. The aid category is food, drinks, drugs, treatments, which cure negative health conditions, and heal packs, which restore your health. Note that treatments each have symbols for the category of conditions that they heal. Note the condition that you have and find a corresponding treatment option to cure it. The notes category are things like quest notes, magazines, and survey data, all of which don't weigh anything and you can just lug them around forever. This category also includes books, which do actually weigh something, so check into this category every so often and sort by weight to check whether you're being weighed down by any random books that you've picked up. Resources are crafting materials. I'll have more on these later. And then finally, miscellaneous contains digipicks, this game's lockpicks, quest items, and junk like staplers, folders, toilet rolls, etc. All of the random things that decorate the world. The vast majority of miscellaneous junk is just set dressing. It doesn't do anything and is only there for selling or to look pretty. Don't hoard heavy and low value miscellaneous junk, but more on that later. Now, before we talk about loot more specifically, let's get into where you will keep it all and how you will move it around. This is actually a pretty big deal and a big part of the game. I mean, moving valuable things from one planet to another and how you actually do so is kind of a big deal in space settings after all. So you'll no doubt develop some of your own strategies and preferences for how you go about managing this, but there are fundamentally three places that you will store loot. The first is on your person in your inventory. Here you'll keep your currently used gear and consumables for healing, buffs, and things like grenades. Everything else should only be in your personal inventory, temporarily in my opinion. If you hoard things in your inventory, you'll constantly just be over encumbered, so get into the frame of mind that everything but your core loadout is only there until you can dump it. The second and possibly most important storage is your ship's cargo holds. You can sell to any vendor directly from your cargo holds. As such, it's where everything that you want to sell should go. You start with something like 400 or so kilos of cargo space, but it's pretty easy to upgrade that, and even a small ship can add cargo holds over 1,000 kilos. That's a lot of loot. Any resources stored in your cargo holds are automatically used when needed for crafting as well, or research or building, so get in the habit of dropping off resources into your cargo holds whenever you can. Remember, when you visit your ship, drop off everything that isn't part of your core kit, so that you have plenty of space for loot on your next adventure. Now, as a side note, you can store more items in containers on your ship's living spaces. There are even hab modules that have things like armories to store weapons and armors on display. Keep in mind though that if you rebuild your ship or change to a new one, all of the stuff stored physically on your ship's storage and display chambers will be dumped into your cargo holds, so I'd only treat it as somewhat temporary storage personally. That is unless you've got your endgame perfect ship all set and ready to go. The third storage category is what I'll call deep storage. This is containers and displays in your owned homes and outposts. Gear, collectibles, or other items you want to hoard long term and don't need in the near future can be stored in these areas to prevent overstuffing your ship's cargo hold. I keep a contraband cache in one of my outposts, for example, as it tends to be quite heavy and it's risky to carry around, so I store it here until I'm ready for a smuggling run. If you want to deep storage your excess resources, I suggest using dedicated storage options for them, as you can later link them up for remote shipping and access in your outposts. Now, a quick note on companions: you can indeed offload things to your companions to carry, but in my opinion it should be treated as a temporary overflow if you get overburdened on an adventure and can't get back to your ship yet with all of your loot. Resources can't be automatically used from companion inventories, and using the take all command can accidentally take items that you actually want your companion to have, like weapons that you've made them equip, so I only use companions as emergency storage personally. Well, let's talk about transferring items between you and your ship, because that is a crucial habit. To stash things in your ship's cargo hold, you must either be on or near your ship. Open the ship menu, which is the H key on PC, and then open the cargo hold menu, F on PC from this screen. Then you can take things from the holds or swap to your inventory with the Q key to stash items on your ship. The resource menu has a hotkey to quickly stash all resources as well, which saves a bunch of time. Don't forget when selling at vendors to also use the Q key to change to your ship's cargo holds when selling to sell remotely. It's a game changer. Getting in the habit of taking full advantage of ship cargo is really key to enjoying the game's loot system. Now let's talk about the crucial useful items you will always want to keep in your personal inventory. This is what I'll refer to as your core kit. You can practically carry and use around 5 or 6 weapons, not counting throwables. So keep on you your best few weapons and a few that serve specific roles. Try to spread out your ammo consumption a bit. It's no good having 3 weapons that all use the same ammo type, as you'll just run out. You kind of have to keep a cutter on you as well, one of the mining lasers, if you ever actually want to mine anything. You don't actually have to hotkey the cutter, as if you have your scanner out and go to shoot, it'll automatically equip your cutter and bring it out for you. For suits, helmets, and backpacks, literally only keep on you what you are actually wearing. They are a bit too heavy to lug around extras of. I personally keep and use liberally all the throwables that I can. Grenades are excellent tools for enemies in cover, for example. But if you're finding that you don't get through them all, and you have more than 10 of anything, especially mines, then stash the excess as the weight can add up. It's a good idea to favorite 2 or more different throwables so you can hotkey swap between them and use them easily. Now, ammo, amazingly, has no weight, so you literally never have to think about it. Just collect and hoard all of it, no worries. Med packs also weigh nothing, so hoard and collect them all. Long term, especially if you're playing in a higher difficulty, it's also a good idea to buy them from vendors whenever you can as well. As they heal a percentage of your health, they stay relevant pretty much always, it seems. Trauma packs are faster applying but less overall healing versions of the heal packs, used for emergencies. They do actually have weight, but it's not much, so feel free to carry around 10 or so of them. You could put these on a separate hotkey for extra healing in emergencies. There are also a bunch of different items called treatments that cure health conditions. They all only weigh around 0.1 kilos each, so feel free to keep a couple of each on hand, but store any excess beyond that as the weight will start to add up. Health conditions only seem to come up occasionally, so you only need a couple on hand at any one time really. Now, it's not worth carrying around junk food and drinks. The 5 health that they heal is basically nothing, and you have to eat dozens to heal. It's not unusual for a character to have several hundred health or more as they level up. Med packs will be doing the bulk of your healing anyway. The food and drink that is worth keeping around is the higher end stuff that gives you damage resistance buffs, carry weight buffs, and speed buffs. This also includes any other aid items like drugs. Anything combat related, keep a bunch of them on hand and use in tough encounters. Heart Plus, for example, is a great all-rounder. Non-combat boosters to things like research or persuasion, I recommend only really keeping 1 or so on hand for special occasions if they come up. The only other item to keep in your inventory is digipicks in the miscellaneous slot. These don't weigh anything and they're your key to more loot, so stockpile them and use them. If you're putting points into the security skill, then I recommend buying them from vendors whenever you can, as you will burn through them pretty fast when you're tackling more advanced locks. Remember that everything else that's not part of your core kit goes in your cargo holds or deep storage. To review, 5 or 6 main weapons that are hotkeyed, a cutter, the clothes and armor you're wearing, a good stock of powerful combat aid buffs, a bare minimum collection of treatments, a tiny selection of non-combat aid buffs, and every scrap of ammo, every digipick, and every med pack that you own. These are what you carry around on your person. Now let's deep dive into resources. These are used for crafting such as weapon modding, research, and outpost building. If you want to engage with any of those systems, then you'll be handling resources and probably a lot of them. I will say though, these systems are somewhat optional. You can just use what you loot, and if you're not carrying around a bunch of resources in your cargo holds, then you'll probably have a fair bit of extra storage and not really need the extra outpost storage. The whole resource system is somewhat self-contained. You get resources to research tech, to build buildings, with resources that can help you get and process more resources, and so on. It's cyclical. The main output that feeds over into the regular game outside of this system is weapon and armor modding and crafting things like aid items. So again, it's somewhat optional, but personally outpost building and resource processing activates my monkey brain neurons, and it's quite fun. Maybe you're the same. So, resources fall into 3 categories: inorganic, organic, and manufactured components. Inorganic raw resources in gas, solid, or liquid forms. Things like argon, gold, and water, for example. You primarily get these from manual or automated mining, and sometimes you can steal them from other people that have done the hard work for you. Organic raw resources are harvested from plants or wildlife that you hunt, or they're grown in farms, or of course, loot from other people and their bases or ships. You'll notice that organic resources can take multiple different forms. For example, antimicrobial, used for making medicine, can be obtained in a generic liquid form, but also in more natural forms like flowers, leaves, or vital fluids harvested from plants or animals. The only difference in these forms is the weight. They all function the same otherwise. So if you're going to sell off excess of these sorts of resources, then sell the heavier ones first. Manufactured components can either be crafted from raw resources manually or automatically at outposts, or they can be looted. Some of these can be quite heavy, like 5 kilograms for a nuclear fuel rod, so I tend to keep as few of these in my cargo holds as possible. Any extra can go in deep storage or be sold off for a profit. Now you may notice that some resources have blue, purple, or yellow diamonds, indicating rarity. The more rare ones can be worth decent amounts of credits, though unless you can get and move these in bulk, there are better ways to make credits in the game, which I'll cover later in the video. The good news is that generally you need fewer of these rare resources, at least in the early game, so you can sell off the excess. Especially if you know where to find more for when you need it later. You can actually blow up asteroids and collect resources from them. It's a bit random what you actually get though. To help you find resources you're looking for, you can tag them for search at a research bench or crafting station. Remember that less is more when tagging though. If everything is tagged, then nothing is. Now before you go looking for it, this game doesn't have the scrapping miscellaneous junk items for resources system like Fallout 4 did. I mean, it made sense in that game, but in this game, people have access to things like mining and automated production. As such, you don't need to collect every roll of tape that you find. Resources are all harvested, mined, or looted. If you want to get into outpost building as soon as possible, then on screen is a bit of a list of some of the commonly needed basic items for outpost power generation, mining, and storage operations to get you started. It's a good idea to keep a healthy little stockpile of these until you can get things more automated down the line. There are some components like adaptive frames and things like that are needed, but they're pretty common and you can also make them yourself easily. Now let's talk about learning to spot loot, a crucial skill in this game. Starfield has really strived to reward thorough explorers, and there's actually a lot of good loot just scattered around on shelves, desks, in lockers, and sometimes in more creative hiding places. Part of the skill of looting is learning to skim over things that you don't need and pick out the good or valuable items, or to anticipate hiding spots where good stuff might be. Try to think about things somewhat realistically. A lot of things make sense contextually, like for example, a table with cards where pirates have been playing poker is probably going to have a few credit sticks on it. A corporate lounge is likely going to have expensive booze, and a med bay will have healing items for you. Getting a feel for this is part of the fun, and it does a lot of the environmental storytelling for you. But I do suggest learning what the 3D items of what you want to collect look like. Especially note things like credit sticks, med packs, digisticks, grenades, and ammo. Knowing what these look like at a glance is really helpful to picking them up from shelves and things. Contraband can be a little trickier, as it can sometimes be a bit incognito looking. If you see something that looks like a small protective briefcase, then check it out closely, as it might be valuable contraband. The majority of loot, especially ammo and medical supplies, actually comes from special containers that are kind of obvious once you know what you're looking for. These containers have lights on them that indicate that they have loot in them, which turns off after they've been empty. This is clever game design. Yellow containers typically contain ammo, throwable items, and the occasional random other resources or items. Occasionally you can also find rare weapons in them too. Green or teal containers look like medkits on walls typically, and they have healing or other aid items in them. It makes sense. Safes are typically obvious and nearly always locked, and they look like safes, so they're pretty easy to pick out. They can contain anything but often have cash and ammo, as well as the occasional rare gear. In addition to those obvious containers, there are also more display style containers like weapon racks and mannequins or helmet cases that have equipment on them. They visually display their items so you can see if there's anything interesting pretty easily. It's a good idea to check these closely though, as sometimes they can contain rare items and not just generic versions. And of course, you don't need me to tell you to loot the baddies that you kill, you're gonna do that on your own. Now, one special note is that this game features a collectible magazine system, where each magazine gives you a permanent passive buff, like increasing specific damage types or increasing your carry rate, which is a really nice one. They are fairly obvious to see, but learn what they look like and keep an eye out for them. Books and notes in this game tend to have blank covers, so the magazines with their art-filled covers do tend to stand out at least. Now, while I've found the occasional good rare item inside random containers and safes, rares and legendary items come from two main places: elite enemies and the special end of dungeon reward crates. Special enemies have extra armor or sturdier life bars, and they seem to nearly always have at least rare items on them, along with the occasional epic or legendary. So if you bring one of these down, make sure you note where their body falls so that you can loot them after the battle. Keep in mind your scanner can help with locating fallen enemies. Dungeons, that is, locations with an interior and enemies to fight, will have a large chest towards the end of them. This might be right before a shortcut back to the exit of a science facility, or at the deepest point of a mine, or perhaps in a large combat area that housed one or more elite enemies. The crates can look different depending on the location, but generally they're quite a bit larger and a bit more special looking than regular lit up containers. A common early example is the large D20 dice looking science container. You'll know you found it when a container has a rare or legendary piece of gear, and a large amount of credits and several other resources or aid items. Now, I've mentioned a few times, but just to go over it, you can get special rarer versions of weapons, spacesuits, helmets, and backpacks. Rare items have one special modifier, epic have two modifiers, and legendary 3, with the third being more impactful legendary modifiers typically. Like for example, incendiary armor that sometimes ignite enemies that attack you, or a shattering modifier on a weapon that breaks through armor. Now when you get into things like shipbuilding or buying resources for building outposts, you can sink some serious credits really quickly. But even without doing those, there are some decent items in shops actually worth buying for a good amount of credits. Of course, you can make credits from missions and such, but if you really want some serious cash, a lot of it is going to come from looting. So here's some specific looting tips for stuff to sell to make a lot of credits. Firstly, learn to spot credit sticks, as there can be quite a few of them lying around, and this can be a sturdy little trickle of cash. They're especially on things like tables where people are playing poker, in pirate loot areas, or personal quarters. Things like lockers and stuff often have them as well. A weird tip, you can actually loot credit sticks from a distance away by scanning them. Gear actually goes for a good amount of credits in this game. I loot higher end but light gear like knives and pistols to sell, and sometimes heavier stuff like suits if I know that I'm just about to visit a shop to sell things. Generally, selling weapons is one of your biggest moneymakers, and it's perfectly legal, and most enemies carry one. Old or antique earth items can also be worth quite a lot. Some books can be worth a lot as well, like old classics or rare books. If a book is 500 credits or more, it's probably worth picking up to sell. There's actually a bookseller in Aquila City that pays a lot for old Earth classic books. It's possible other booksellers may also do the same. In general, for credits, you're looking for high value, low weight items. With this in mind, you can start to consider looting some miscellaneous items that can't be used for anything else. Things like cigarettes, high-speed data cables, small consumer electronics like tablets, and so on. High-end alcohol and food can also be pretty good credits as well. Some rare resources sell for a decent amount, but they often weigh a lot and are also needed later for crafting or building. That said, if you can get down a gold extractor, for example, and have a ship with a decent cargo hold, you could get a nice, almost passive income going. There are special trade authority missions as well to provide large amounts of resources in bulk where you can earn a few extra credits for them. So that's something to look into later on once you have a few outposts going. Most common raw resources don't really sell for much compared to their weight. You're mostly stockpiling to build things like outposts, research, and craft. However, you can process raw resources into more valuable manufactured components, either manually or later in an automated fashion at outposts. These can potentially sell for a bit more if you end up with large excesses. Contraband is another option, and these are a big money maker. These are banned or restricted items like the drug Aurora, mech adapters, sentient AI adapters, and xeno warfare tech. Each of these can be worth a whole lot of credits, but they're risky to carry around and have to be smuggled in shielded cargo holds to be sold at dodgy merchants. Check out my crime guide for more on contraband. As a bit of a bonus credit making tip, you can actually just pull up to any gas or ice giant, those are the planets you can't land on, and just scan them for instant full survey data that you can sell. It's basically free credits, just make sure you sell them to Vladimir in the Eye to get the most out of it. And there you have it. I think a fairly comprehensive guide to loot in Starfield. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments and subscribe to keep an eye out for more Starfield guides. That's it for now. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching.